I'm absolutely delighted to be invited to do this talk on tokenizing rewilding. Actually, two of my favorite subjects, so I'm doubly excited to give the talk. My name's Cain Blythe. I'm CEO of Ecosulis, and we're the first UK business to have dedicated our purpose to rewilding. Funnily enough, I'm a bit of a tech geek and also a nature geek, and I've always been driven by this idea that actually technology can be something, a force for good. One of the first things we do when we're working with landowners or farmers is we often ask them to kind of project into the future and imagine what kind of future might be possible. So many imagine a place where communities are coming together alongside regenerative agricultural practices. And these are spaces where we've got mixed herds of animals, we've got the potential for eco-pods and ecotourism, and a rich array of enterprise opportunities that come through from the regeneration. Some of them perhaps have got a slightly more nature-led vision. They want to see a place where nature's allowed to rebound. And then others still may actually have imagine a time where we might see herds of kept wild animals such as the European bison. But it's quite safe to say that I haven't yet come across any of the landowners that imagine a world full of non-fungible tokens with crypto kitties and crypto punks and NBA Top Shop collectibles as part of that rewilding vision. And quite frankly, why would they? So the aim of my talk today is to persuade you actually NFTs and tokens, they might just be the conduit through which we can kickstart rewilding and potentially on a very large scale. How can we help landowners and tenant farmers transition to these new exciting forms of enterprise? I mentioned regenerative agriculture, nature, incorporating nature-based solutions, thinking about rewilding potentially. And also, how can we provide a mechanism through which, investors, those who are driven by environmental, social governance ambitions, corporates and fund managers, how can we help them have assurance that their money is being well spent and put to the right things? I'd heard of real estate NFTs. I'd heard of species conservation related NFTs. So I was wondering, is it possible to bridge this gap with such tokens? So if you don't know, blockchain technologies first hit the mainstream sometime in 2009 when Bitcoin was launched. And it's used variously as a store of value, sometimes for transferring funds, and occasionally for buying goods and services. But very quickly, those who are working in the blockchain space realized that Bitcoin only had a certain level of utility. Bitcoin was a bit too slow. It required too many approvals to be upgraded, had quite a low number of transactions per second. And Ethereum by design has a lot more utility. This enabled the development of quite a few different technologies, including those around gaming, voting systems, emerging decentralized finance mechanisms, and more recently, the emergence of non-fungible tokens. One of the earliest non-fungible tokens was CryptoKitties. What was different was that these NFTs, by their nature being non-fungible, were unique. People could buy and own a CryptoKitty through the game. The most valuable CryptoKitty sold for 600 ether, which is equivalent to was about £100,000 at the time. It's now worth just over £1 million in value. The development around NFTs and tokens has been kind of expanding rapidly, and the associated market for NFT tokens is predicted to be roughly in the region of about 80 billion by 2025. Because they're time-stamped, they can be linked to specific on-chain data. That means it's recorded on the blockchain. Anyone is able to prove ownership, and as well as that, you can prove provenance and also the legacy of the tokens. Because they're non-fungible, they're unique, that scarcity can be considered to be proof of digital rarity, and that can actually increase their value. Once they're set up, NFTs can actually be bought, sold, retired, transferred, minted, which means regenerated, and that can happen relatively quickly and at low transaction costs. And because data is recorded on the blockchain, it's secure, traceable, effectively it's immutable, which means it can't be tampered with. The final point here, NFTs allow the development of certain types of governance. So alongside, you can design in voting rights, transfer rights, and also you can connect NFTs across different types of community. But despite their potential, they also have many critics. And in fact, some of these criticisms are true. So there have been scams. There are definitely NFTs out there that are unsustainable. There is evidence that criminals do use them. This idea about carbon footprint and that there are very gimmicky aspects to NFTs. Some of them in some instances certainly have merit. NFTs are a nascent technology. And actually when rewilding first started to emerge in the UK, and actually still to this day, there are criticisms thrown at it. So again, some of these in some instances can be considered to be valid concerns. So we're very cognizant of these concerns and criticisms. But I think at the same time, we recognize that there are some, really substantial drivers emerging in the ecosystem out there. We've got COP26, we've got the decade of ecosystem restoration. There's this rise of environmental social governance interest and impact investing, and perhaps a move away from intensive carbon forestry and towards areas where you incorporate more nature positive approaches. I think there's also now a recognition that a focus on carbon and biodiversity alone can ignore ecosystem processes. We're now in a time of significant convergence of technology, science and practice, powering the opportunity to help monitor the Earth systems in an ever more kind of accurate way. The speeding up and the scaling up of these types of technologies are allowing us to improve the utility of such technologies, and particularly how, in this instance, how they can be applied into the blockchain. So it's our proposition that NFTs can, if thought about and developed in the right way, be a way to channel significant investment, create value through scarcity and utility and sharing, reduce the risk of greenwashing and cheating, provide a means to support traditional and new land enterprise, and offer a channel to build memberships, community, and even potentially social movements. And that there are parallels in that rewilding can enable an ecosystem approach to nature recovery, provide a means to support local communities and kickstart tertiary economies, be compatible with traditional and new forms of land management, and can be seen as a social movement gathering momentum, and act as a nature-based solution to the climate and biodiversity crises. And if we bring together these two forces for change, then hopefully you can at least anticipate that there might be some good that can come of it. I thought I'd address the sort of question of, isn't this just the same as credits? But whilst there are similarities, there are some differences. So credits are often there as a means to offset impacts. They have sort of variability in the results and potential for greenwashing, and typically rely on a brokerage model. One of our key differences here that credits are often associated with offsetting harm. It's not quite the same as what we would see with NFTs. They would be built on the basis that you would be gathering direct evidence of future delivery. So we're not using proxy measures. As I mentioned before, they offer the opportunity to prove provenance and also incorporate other types of perks and benefits. But you can also then buy, retire, or sell the tokens. So an interesting difference here is how tokens can actually be considered to be a recognition of contribution to nature recovery. So it's more of a positive story, which then allows for improved public relations, the idea of legacy building, recruitment benefits, and giving pride and esteem to those who are associated with it. We tend to think of the credits, the biodiversity credits and the carbon offset credits as kind of the first generation where we integrate these with a rewilding token. We're able to demonstrate that there's a nature positive approach that deals with the functional downgrading of ecosystems. And so this enables the development and delivery of nature-based solutions, multiple forms of ecosystem service, and not just carbon and biodiversity alone. And also very much about, building in ecosystem recovery and resilience, so carbon permanence, for example, within healthy functioning ecosystems. There are now a kind of emerging different categories of NFT. We've got the community NFTs, which involve opportunity for fundraising, membership, events, and sort of social movements. And then we've got the class of impact NFTs, which are very much around aimed at protection of and repopulation of species, or protection and recovery of natural assets, such as our rewilding token. There's an interesting one associated with the US national parks, and this allows the sort of 60 odd national parks in the US to gain support. So when you purchase these national park NFTs, you secure membership to the National Parks Club, and part of the purchase price of the NFT is then donated to the National Park Foundation, and some of it is donated to other charities. You also, by association, you gain access to discounted equipment and experiences. Another example is a recent one developed by WWF. They released quite an attractive array of NFTs, and I hasten to add, very briefly. So they had these compelling designs. The idea was that they wanted to fund the endangered species program for different types of endangered species. And it was a very compelling offering. The problem was the blockchain platform that they launched on, Polygon, sat on top of Ethereum, which effectively requires much more energy. The point is that it wasn't as low carbon a solution as they were hoping. There are some key success parameters for NFTs, and I think some of these actually apply to rewilding projects as well. So great communication is really important. So the more people you can engage and communicate with, the better. It does require a fair amount of creativity and entrepreneurism, trying to think of things from different perspectives, what hasn't worked before, and how can we create solutions that are better for all. Embracing others' views is really important. If the investment that's being attracted is for impact, then that's another sort of shared value. Like we do on some of our rewilding projects, we incorporate phases that perhaps increase the ambition along each step of the way. So we're not just sort of hitting everyone with everything in one go. That helps to build trust. I think when you're discussing NFTs or rewilding, you want to make sure that you're as backed by evidence as you possibly can, and then start to think about how can you configure the discourse around making sure that the storytelling is aimed at developing hope and purpose and support through those means. But understanding the environmental agenda is, or the supporting environmental agenda, is very important. We've taken up the challenge of developing a token and potentially additions of different types of tokens. The first is that when we've designed this, we've been aiming and thinking about how can we channel significant investment through these tokens. These tokens actually fit in with the emerging raft of and the taxonomy of green fintech solutions. And these are designed to enable investors and buyers to understand the mechanics and do due diligence on those sort of green fintech mechanisms. the tokens have to incorporate the idea that we're looking for both sort of carbon neutral as well as nature positive drivers, and connecting the mechanisms within the design of the tokens to support that. And then the aim of the tokens is to provide a bridge through which investors can connect and overcome the viability gap that currently exists there. You know, there's significant investment out there, but there's not yet a mechanism to land that. And part of that is to make sure that there's a robust set of specification and data to allow for due diligence, and that these are based on ecosystem recovery metrics, and also that they're facilitating scale. A lot of the investments that are interested in investing are looking for quite large scale and not necessarily just niche projects. The second element of what we're developing is, as I've kind of emphasized a few points, is that it's important to evidence the baseline and record change. So as opposed to some of the proxy measures, we have designed up a range of indexes that record data from key dimensions, and they measure the health of the ecosystem asset that's present, and also their suitability to support rewilding commitments that are associated with the baseline, and how do we, and they'll measure the uplift in the integrity of the ecosystem that's present. These indexes are designed on the very best practice in rewilding and conservation science. So once we've done that, we're able to agree what ecosystem outputs are best suited to monitor the progress on site. So for example, whether there's a need to align with other monitoring systems, such as the widely adopted biodiversity net gain or the difframetric. And then the combination of inputs and outputs at the baseline stage and the relative impact of the forecast improvements, these can then directly evidence and define the proposed levels of uplift for the project. And it's that element of the uplift that we can tokenize within the NFT. A third key benefit is within the design of the tokens, they can be linked to a range of land management commitments. And for these specific tokens, these commitments will be based on the latest kind of practices that enable the generation of multiple forms of value. So whilst there would be common activities and commitments, such as enabling natural regeneration to occur, reintroducing natural herds or mixed herds of herbivores, or even generation of different types of products that have their own forms of revenue, such as artisan products, creating multiple forms of value that are valued by the public. We're aiming to reduce the level of commodification of nature, because clearly there are some negatives associated with that. Now, the fourth element is that, you know, once we've built our picture of the assets present, we've identified what the level of inputs and outputs would be, what effect that's going to have on the integrity of the ecosystem, and what type of commitments can actually be built into that. We're able to then feed that into an investment prospectus, and depending on the quality of the data inputs, that will determine the level of confidence levels in the uplift of those ecosystem processes. So within the prospectus, we can define what are considered both off-chain attributes, so things that aren't incorporated into the NFT, and those things that are on-chain, so how we then build into the blockchain registry, and that might include some of the perks and benefits in terms of percentages of money going into certain places, that kind of thing. So there are four kind of really key elements that we've kind of designed into our our concepts for the token. We're very lucky at Ecosulis. We've got a talented team of developers led by Dr. Paul Jepson, who kind of consist of ecosystem analysts, mathematicians, GIS experts. Yorkshire's been a fantastic test bed for us in the sense that there are very progressive landowners who've committed some level of support to allow rewilding across their land. We've started to undertake some of our ecosystem baselining. At the same time, we've got sort of in principle agreements from corporates that this is the type of green fintech solution that they would be interested in. You know, partnership is really, really important. We're not going to do this on our own. So we're looking at things like how do we put the contracts in place, both for the off-chain elements and also how do we design the smart contracts. How do we, the next phase then is to design and code and launch some funky NFTs. And then we're then sort of thinking about pitching it to the market. So we're fortunate to be involved with the Oxford Sustainability Finance Group, who have secured some funding to look at, you know, what does an NFT marketplace or token marketplace need to look like? How's its functionality from a governance, sustainability, security kind of perspective, things like that. So, you know, once these markets are maturing, there'll then need to be a marketplace to host them and allow the sort of safe buying and trading and minting of them. If this works, we'll be able to start to move away perhaps from slightly more barren scenes such as these, which are relatively low in life and maybe limited in opportunities, moving much more towards nature-rich environments that have multiple forms of benefit for people. And you never know, if we're lucky and with the help of some NFTs, we might then be able to start to fund some really interesting and environmentally beneficial restoration and recovery programs.